When people come to me for career advice, they often ask me, Amir, what is the one thing that you believe that I need to do in my career? And my response is always this: be more strategic in your career. And some people get it, some people get that advice, but most people are really actually confounded by that advice, and not because they don't understand what it means to be strategic, but being strategic in your career is not a mainstream notion. Mainstream notion is you get an education, you get a job. You get a better education, you get a better job. That's mainstream. But being strategic in your career, that is not a mainstream notion. But there's another reason why I lose people, and that's because this advice, being strategic in your career, really contains two very vague terms, and that's career and strategy. And if you really think about it, career is not a concrete term. It's actually quite vague. And it's not as concrete as a job. A job is concrete. You either have one or you don't. It is either there or it isn't. Career, it's not as concrete. Two people can look at a career and one will say, well, yeah, okay, well, that's a career. Another person will say, well, that doesn't look like a career. It just looks like just a string of jobs. There's nothing that holds those jobs together. And let's talk about the word strategy. Talk about a word that has been overused in business circles. It's been used in so many different contexts that we start to forget what it actually means. And we often find ourselves asking, well, what is strategy? You'll find a lot of articles, a lot of LinkedIn posts asking this question, well, what is strategy really, right? When if you really break it down and you really think about it, strategy is simply, trying to figure out how to get what you want with what you have. And that's the context in which I provide this advice to be more strategic in your careers. Try to figure out how to get what you want in your career using what you have. But let's take it a step further. Instead of getting caught up in the meaning of this advice, meaning of these terms, let's talk about how you can be more strategic in your career. And hopefully that should clear up any questions that you have. So there's really 5 things that you can do to be more strategic in your career. The first is think about your career as a business. And what that means is you've got to think of your jobs as services that you offer, that you provide to your customers who are your employers. Now, I hope you got that. So think of your career as your business, think of your jobs as your services, and think of your employers as your customers. Now, this is a huge shift in thinking, because what it does is it brings all the worries and concerns that businesses have, to stay relevant in their industries, to stay relevant to their customers. It brings those tensions and worries into your career. And actually it's for good reason, because nowadays we can't get comfortable in our jobs. Nowadays jobs come and go like this. Companies come and go like this. This is a very different time than maybe 20 or 30 years ago, when you could expect to work in a company for 10, 20 to 30 years. Nowadays the economy goes belly up and companies are laying people off, and people who have served in companies for 20, 25 years, who got very used to their companies, who stopped working on themselves, stopped taking care, stopped staying sharp, stopped thinking about being relevant, to their customers. And when you see these people out in the streets, looking for their next job, they're struggling to figure out, they're struggling to communicate their relevance to their next employer. And it's hard, it's sort of like watching Blockbuster trying to communicate their relevance, in this day and age. So that's the first thing that you have to do, is think of your career as your business and adopt that mind shift that you need in order to treat your career as your business. The second thing you need to do is you need to think about your end game. What is your end game in your career? Businesses have an end game. They have a vision of what it is that they want to achieve. They either want a specific valuation, or they want to enter into a certain market, or they want to be a dominant player in a particular market. So similarly, what is your end game in your career? What is that win? What is that end goal that you want to achieve in your career? Is it a title? Is it is it being a player in a particular type of industry? Is it or is it money? What is your end game? And that will serve you in defining what your strategy is going to be, what your career strategy is going to be. So that's the second thing you need to do, is figure out what your end game is. The third thing that you need to do is you need to have a great customer acquisition and relationship strategy. Great companies do this really well. They have great strategies to acquire the right customer and maintain relationships with the right customer. So in your career, how is it that what do you need to do in order to make sure that you attract the right customers in your career or for your career? This again, it's a huge shift in mindset, because it forces us to not get comfortable in our jobs and lose sight of our other customers. But also it gets us to think about, well, what is it that we can do to make sure that we are relevant to our next employers? What is it that we can do to make sure that we are attractive enough for our next employers? And how can we make sure, how do we go about acquiring our next employers? That's really what this strategy is all about. So think about this, for your career, what is your strategy for acquiring new customers? So what is your strategy for attracting new employers? The fourth thing that you need to do is, again, what all great companies do, and that is focus on their competitive advantage. Companies have competitive, or they build competitive advantage in, maybe in their markets, or in their knowledge base, or in the channels that they secure, or maybe the cost structure that they're able to bring down. They find ways to build advantages to give them that dominant power in their industry. So similarly for your career, what are the competitive advantages that you are going to build for yourself? What are those advantages? Again, this is going to separate you in the market. It's what's going to help you stand out in the market compared to your competition. And if you do this well enough, it'll eliminate your competition. So that's the fourth thing that you need to think about, is what are your competitive advantages, and how can you continue to build those competitive advantages? And the fifth and final thing that you need to do is you need to fire your quote-unquote bad customers. Businesses have this. There are bad customers out there, customers who are going to drain your resources, customers who are going to question everything that you do, customers who are going to not buy essentially from you. They are low margin, they are pain in the butts, they just drain your resources, and they don't do anything for your business. They don't push you forward, they don't help you with the rest of your customers. Same thing. There are going to be employers who are quote-unquote bad employers, bad customers for you. So question is, in your career, how do you identify who these bad employers are? How do you know, what are the characteristics that are that you need to pay attention to that are going to identify these employers as essentially your bad customers? And I should say that, one employer may, like for you, an employer may be a bad customer, but it may not be the case for another person. Maybe for me, it may not be a bad employer, bad customer. So it really comes down to what your personal criteria is for what a bad employer is, what a bad customer is. So think about this for your career. What would be a bad customer? What would be a bad employer? What are their characteristics? And secondly, once you figure out once you figure out that you indeed are dealing with a bad employer or a bad customer, how are you going to change it? What is your strategy to fire these bad employers and bad customers? So again, those are 5 things to think about to help you be more strategic in your career. Hey, Amir Radali here. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, there's a few things you can do to make sure that we continue our relationship. First, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel to make sure that you're notified of when I release my next video. Second, you can join me on Facebook, where I share daily insights and inspiration to help you recharge and energize for your workday. And third, you can sign up for some free training on my website, where I offer some free training on how to fast track your career. So there you go. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, join me on Facebook, sign up for some free training. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video.